Imagine signing off on one of the most complex, fiercely negotiated corporate restructurings in Silicon Valley history. I mean, you have armies of lawyers, endless state investigations, and finally this massive multi-billion-dollar deal gets stamped with state approval.
Right. You think you're totally in the clear.
Exactly. Everything is structurally sound. You move forward. But then, like a year later, during an entirely separate trial, a dusty notebook from 8 years prior gets entered into evidence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it belonged to one of the original architects of the company. And right there in ink, it outlines a private roadmap to fundamentally subvert the very foundation of the deal you just approved.
It instantly shifts the ground beneath your feet. That definitive stamp of approval you relied on is suddenly sitting on a fault line of potential fraud.
And that is exactly the structural panic we are exploring today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. For you listening, we are looking at the ongoing legal fallout between Elon Musk and Sam Altman.
Yeah, specifically through the lens of a highly detailed legal analysis generated by the AI model Grok.
Right. Which zeroes in on a piece of evidence that has just totally upended the board, the 2017 private diary entries of Greg Brockman.
It's such a fascinating look at how foundational secrets have a way of, surviving long enough to collide with present-day corporate realities.
They really do. Now, a quick note for you listening before we get too deep into this. We are absolutely not taking sides here between Elon Musk or OpenAI's leadership.
Right, totally impartial.
Exactly. We are simply unpacking the facts and the legal theories presented in this source text. We're just the messengers here.
Yep, just analyzing the data we have.
Right. So to set the scene, it is mid-May 2026. And based on these sources, we're talking about the potential for actual felony charges against OpenAI's leadership.
Which is wild.
It is. And there's this push by Elon Musk to get the California Attorney General to entirely reopen their corporate restructuring.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this. If a deal was finalized in 2025, how does a diary from 2017 threaten to tear it all down?
Well, the legal jeopardy here lives entirely in the timeline. We need to look closely at October 2025, specifically October 27th and 28th. Over those 2 days, the California Attorney General's office under Rob Bonta executed a Memorandum of Understanding with OpenAI, an MOU.
Right, the MOU.
Yeah, and this wasn't just administrative paperwork. This was the state's formal blessing for OpenAI to transition its core structure into a public benefit corporation.
Let's pause on that mechanism for a second because, for you listening, you probably know OpenAI started as a 501c3 tax-exempt charity.
Right.
But transitioning to a public benefit corporation, or PBC, isn't just flipping a switch, is it?
No, not at all.
The state gets involved because you're essentially taking assets that were legally promised to the public good and wrapping them in a for-profit vehicle, even if that vehicle has a stated public benefit.
Precisely. In charity law, those original assets are held in an irrevocable trust for the public. You can't just take IP developed under a tax-exempt charity umbrella and poof, hand it over to private shareholders.
Right. The state has to protect the public's investment.
Exactly. The Attorney General's job is to aggressively price that transition, making sure the public is properly compensated. So Bonta's office only signed that 2025 MOU after conducting a really sweeping investigation into the fairness of the deal, the valuation, the internal governance, all of it.
And here's where the massive blind spot comes in. When the AG's office signed that deal in 2025, they had no idea about Greg Brockman's 2017 diary.
Completely in the dark.
I mean, it's like buying a house after a spotless inspection in 2025, only to find a contractor's notebook in 2026 admitting they used faulty materials back in 2017.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, those journal entries were completely private. They only surfaced prominently in the public record during the intense discovery and testimony of the Musk versus OpenAI trial.
Right, which was April and May of 2026.
Exactly, months after the state had already locked in the MOU.
But wait, I have to challenge the premise here. Because in the tech industry, 8 years is essentially a millennium.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Founders pivot business models before breakfast. A diary from 2017 is ancient history. Why does the state care about what someone jotted down nearly a decade ago if the 2025 deal was independently negotiated and audited? Ambition changes, right?
It's a totally fair pushback, but it kind of misinterprets what regulators look for. The state doesn't care if you change your business model. They care if you actively concealed your true intent while operating a charity.
Intent.
Right. The Grok analysis points out that this diary doesn't just show a casual pivot. It documents a fundamental internal contradiction to the core public narrative and the legal obligations the company was operating under at that specific time.
Okay, so take us inside these specific entries. What exactly did the trial record reveal that triggered this whole analysis?
Well, the analysis zeroes in on several really specific reflections from Brockman in 2017. First, it explicitly details deep for-profit ambitions.
At a time when they were supposed to be a nonprofit?
Yeah.
Exactly. At a time when the leadership was actively soliciting funds under the strict premise of being a nonprofit. And second, it highlights internal moral anxiety.
What do you mean?
There are documented reflections in the diary questioning whether they were being truly honest with Elon Musk, who was, crucially, their primary financial backer at the time.
Wow. Putting on paper, "Are we deceiving our biggest donor?" is definitely a bad-looking discovery.
It really is. But the phrase that truly elevates this from a bad look to a potential legal crisis is a specific written reference to stealing the nonprofit.
Stealing the nonprofit.
Yeah.
I mean, as a prosecutor, you dream of finding a phrase like that.
You really do, because it speaks directly to intent. And it gets worse because the diary pairs that phrase with a very specific personal financial target. It actually mentions a goal of reaching $1 billion.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because let's break down the mechanics of the law here.
Yeah.
Wanting to be a billionaire is practically a prerequisite for living in Silicon Valley. It might be deeply distasteful to write that down while you are ostensibly running a 501c3 public charity.
Right.
But distasteful isn't a felony.
Right. It's not illegal to want money.
So how do prosecutors cross the gap from a greedy diary entry in 2017 to the threat of criminal fraud in 2026?
That is the core legal question. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it all revolves around the concept of fiduciary duty, specifically the duty of candor during that 2025 restructuring.
Okay, walk us through that.
So a board member of a charity has an absolute fiduciary duty of loyalty to the organization's mission, not to their own wallet.
Right.
If you are secretly strategizing about stealing the nonprofit to hit $1 billion personal windfall, you are arguably documenting an active breach of that duty.
But again, that breach happened in 2017.
Yes, but the cover-up arguably happened in 2025.
Ah, the cover-up.
Exactly. When the Attorney General evaluates a restructuring, they rely heavily on sworn representations made by the leadership. The leaders essentially have to sign documents stating, "We have faithfully executed our duties, we are providing a complete and transparent accounting of the charity's history, and this transition is fair."
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. If you sign those documents while knowing you harbored and acted upon a long-standing private plan to enrich yourself at the charity's expense, and you fail to disclose that to the AG, that is where the trap snaps shut.
Because it becomes a material omission.
Precisely. It frames a potential case for misrepresentation or a failure to disclose material facts to a state regulator. In corporate governance, the lie you tell to cover up the past action is often what carries the severe legal consequences, including the potential for fraud or perjury charges.
So if I understand the timeline of the legal jeopardy here, it's not just that they had these thoughts in 2017.
Right.
It's that in 2025, they went to the state of California, asked for permission to restructure, and effectively said, "Here is everything you need to know to make a fair decision." And the AG made a multi-billion-dollar decision without knowing the founders had previously brainstormed hijacking the assets.
That is the exact theory of the case, the analysis outlines. The diary is contemporaneous evidence of intent that was allegedly withheld during a major regulatory review.
Okay, but let's look at the enforcer in this scenario. Because for you listening, we often think of corporate contracts as finalized the moment the ink dries.
Yeah, signed, sealed, delivered.
Right. But dealing with the state attorney general on charity matters is a different beast entirely. Explain the actual machinery of the AG's power here.
Right.
If Rob Bonta already signed the MOU in 2025, can his office retroactively blow up the deal? Do they actually have a legal undo button?
They do, actually, and it stems from a legal doctrine known as supervisory authority. In most states, the Attorney General is the ultimate statutory protector of charitable trusts. Because a charity has no shareholders to sue on its behalf when things go wrong, the AG steps in. They act as the lawyer for the public good.
Meaning their jurisdiction doesn't just end because a deal closed.
Precisely. That 2025 approval was contingent on the facts presented at the time. If credible material new information emerges, like, say, trial evidence suggesting the negotiations were tainted by concealed motives, the AG's office has a broad spectrum of mechanisms they can activate.
For you listening, this is really a masterclass in how corporate governance isn't just a one-time stamp of approval. It's an ongoing relationship with the state where past secrets can detonate present agreements.
Absolutely.
So what do those mechanisms actually look like in practice? Are we talking about sending in the police, or is it more bureaucratic?
Well, it usually starts out aggressively bureaucratic and scales up from there. They can deploy their subpoena power to demand entirely new forensic accountings of all finances spanning the last decade. They can order exhaustive independent audits and make the company pay for them.
Wow.
Yeah. And if they find the 2025 agreement was based on incomplete information, they can force the company back to the negotiating table to radically modify the terms of the MOU.
And what if the company refuses?
Then they move to direct enforcement actions. The AG has the authority to sue the corporate officers directly, petition a court to forcefully remove the leadership, claw back transferred assets, or, as we discussed earlier, refer the matter for criminal prosecution if the misrepresentation crosses into fraud.
That is just a staggering amount of leverage hovering over a major tech company.
It is. The door on a charity restructuring is never truly locked if there is evidence of deceit.
But we have to look at the practical reality of this, because the legal theory is one thing, but execution is another.
Very true.
Just because the state can launch a massive investigation doesn't mean they will. Tearing apart the structure of the world's leading AI company based on a diary feels like a logistical nightmare, not to mention a political minefield.
Oh, this raises an important question. Will the state actually step in? It is a massive hurdle. And that brings us to the primary defense here, which hinges on the corporate law standard of deference.
The deference, okay.
Yeah. Courts and regulators generally defer to agreements that were properly vetted by state agencies, particularly when those agreements were fiercely negotiated and already include heavy concessions.
And the 2025 MOU was packed with concessions, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just a rubber stamp.
Far from it. Bonta's office extracted significant guardrails. To allow the public benefit corporation transition, the state ensured that the original nonprofit entity retained ultimate control over the board.
Right.
They legally locked in a massive equity stake for the nonprofit, ensuring the public good would financially benefit from the AI's commercial success. They also made strict AI safety commitments legally binding within the corporate charter.
So the defense is essentially going to walk into the AG's office and say, look, we know these guys are cutthroat. You knew they were cutthroat. That is exactly why you built such a heavy regulatory cage around them in 2025.
Exactly.
The diary just proves what we already assumed, that human beings want to make money. But the structure you built accounts for that. The system worked.
That is exactly the narrative they will push. They will argue that 2017 thoughts do not equate to post-2025 misconduct. The AG really has to weigh whether the newly discovered intent from 2017 actually alters the mathematical fairness of the deal they struck in 2025.
I imagine the AG's power is highly discretionary.
Highly. Launching a new investigation would cost the state millions of dollars and years of litigation. They have to decide if reopening this specific can of worms actually serves the broader public interest, given their limited resources. Though Bonta's office has publicly stated they are keeping a close eye on OpenAI.
But they also can't just ignore it.
Right.
Because the public pressure is mounting. The sources highlight that the post-trial environment is already chaotic.
Oh, it's a mess.
You have coalitions of outside watchdog groups, nonprofits, and tech critics who have taken the trial record, highlighted the Brockman diary, and are actively petitioning the Attorney General to step in.
And OpenAI is returning fire. They aren't just passively defending the 2025 MOU.
What do they do with it?
They are actively lobbying the AG to investigate Elon Musk instead, likely focusing on his own competing AI ventures and his historical influence over the nonprofit. It is a full-scale, multi-front war for regulatory favor.
Which brings us to the ultimate strategic question of this deep dive. So what does this all mean for Elon Musk? If he is trying to use this 2017 diary to systematically dismantle the 2025 restructuring, how does he cut through the noise of all these outside groups? What is his actual playbook here?
Well, the Grok analysis maps out a very specific tactical move. Musk cannot rely on media outrage or the momentum of watchdog groups. To force the issue, his best strategic move is to formalize the legal process.
How so?
By submitting a meticulously documented petition directly to the Attorney General's Charitable Trusts section.
He has to build a prosecutor's case for them.
He literally has to hand it to them on a silver platter. The petition needs to draw a direct, undeniable line between the 2017 diary entries, the sworn transcripts from the 2026 trial, and the specific representations OpenAI made to the state in 2025.
So doing all the exhaustive legal legwork to prove that the state was materially misled.
Exactly.
But why does Musk's petition matter more than anyone else's? Like, if a watchdog group submits the exact same documents, does the AG treat it differently? What makes Musk the catalyst?
It comes down to his unique standing and legal leverage within charity law. Musk is not just an outside critic. He was a co-founder and, critically, a massive early financial donor to the original nonprofit.
He funded the initial corpus of the trust.
Exactly. In the eyes of the law, a donor who gave tens of millions of dollars based on a specific, legally binding charitable promise is viewed differently than just a random member of the general public. If that initial charitable intent was subverted, if the leaders were planning to steal the nonprofit while taking his money, Musk is arguably the primary injured party.
I see.
Now, while the Attorney General ultimately acts entirely independently, a formal complaint from the founding major donor carries a profound level of credibility and structural weight. It is very difficult for a regulator to simply dismiss it.
So the AG doesn't work for him, but they are legally obligated to take his grievance incredibly seriously, especially when it's backed by new written evidence from the company's own architects.
That is the tactical reality here. The diary undeniably strengthens the case for regulatory scrutiny. It provides the internal, contemporaneous state of mind that was completely missing from the 2025 review.
There's not a silver bullet.
No, it's not a guaranteed victory. The state has already invested immense political and legal capital into the current structure. But filing this petition remains one of Musk's most powerful indirect weapons, running parallel to whatever formal legal appeals he pursues in civil court.
It is genuinely incredible to map out how fragile these massive corporate structures really are. For you listening, this deep dive highlights a fascinating reality about the modern digital age. We watch billions of dollars move at the speed of light. We see artificial intelligence advancing exponentially. Yet the entire trajectory of the most powerful technology company on Earth might be redefined by the slowest, most analog thing imaginable.
A few private thoughts jotted down in a notebook.
Exactly. A notebook from nearly a decade ago. It really proves that in corporate governance, foundational secrets have a remarkably long half-life.
They absolutely do. And the implications of this legal battle stretch far beyond the boardroom or even the Attorney General's office. It leaves us with a really critical structural question to consider.
What's the question?
Well, think about it. If the foundational DNA of the company building the world's most advanced artificial intelligence is legally and historically rooted in a deep, perhaps irreconcilable tension, a tug-of-war between a mandated public charity mission and a private billion-dollar ambition, how might those hidden structural cracks influence the actual AI systems they deploy into your daily life?
Oh, wow.
Right. If the creators themselves were navigating profound internal contradictions about honesty, mission, and profit, do those underlying tensions eventually become the blind spots of the technology itself?
If the foundation is built on conflicting motives, how does that shape the logic of the machine that grows out of it? There's a profound angle to consider as this technology integrates into our daily lives. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structural foundations of the stories you see, and we will catch you next time.